My husband and I had been working for many years, but I stopped working when my son, Aden, was born. When Aden turned 3, I thought I could return to work with the help of a nanny. The next day, 3 or 4 people who saw the ad came for an interview, but I didn't find the right fit. Then came the last person, a woman named Sheena. She had a kind face, but what moved me was her story. She and her husband had tried everything to have children, but nothing worked. Heartbroken, they decided to become caregivers to other people's kids, hoping it would ease their pain. I had never considered hiring someone inexperienced, but I couldn't ignore her sadness. I convinced myself to give her a chance. If it didn't work out, I would let her go kindly. So I hired Sheena. She was overjoyed, and when I saw her with my son, my heart softened. I was sure she would care for Aden as if he were her own. For months, she handled Aden well, and nothing went wrong. Sometimes, her husband Jeffrey would visit and play with Aden too. My husband and I were pleased. What started as an employer-employee relationship turned into something close to family. 3 months later, I fell ill with a terrible flu. Until then, Sheena had only worked in the afternoons, but I asked if she could stay overnight for a few days. She agreed without hesitation. One night, I woke up to Aden's cries. When I reached his room, Sheena was already there, looking concerned. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked. I picked up Aden and reassured her. I rocked him for hours, but he wouldn't calm down. My husband came in, worried. "Let's take him to the hospital," he said. As I changed Aden's clothes, I noticed a bruise on his leg. Shocked, I called Sheena over. She swore she had done nothing and insisted Aden hadn't fallen. At the hospital, the doctors ran tests. Finally, the doctor returned with the results. "Your son is fine," he said. "The tests are normal." Still, I felt uneasy. Quietly, so Sheena wouldn't hear, I pulled the doctor aside and asked if the bruise could have been caused by abuse. But he shook his head. "Impossible. The marks are internal." His words reassured me, partially. When we returned home, I found Sheena reading the medication instructions. Anxiety gnawed at me. What if she had given Aden expired food? I checked all his baby food, but everything was in date. That night, exhausted from stress, I went to bed early. My husband had a night shift, so I was alone with Sheena and Aden. I fell asleep immediately. Suddenly, Aden's cries shattered the silence. I rushed to his room and froze. Sheena was sitting beside his bed, gripping his tiny leg, twisting it slightly as she whispered, "I hate you. I hate all babies." A chill ran down my spine. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed, rushing toward her. She turned to face me. Her expression was twisted, monstrous. Before I could react, she grabbed the bedside lamp and swung it at me, hitting my shoulder. Then she bolted from the room, running straight out of the house. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and called the police. Then I called my husband. Within minutes, officers arrived, recording everything I said. They searched for Sheena for months. They even went to her home, but it was empty. No trace of her or Jeffrey. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Years passed, and I chose to raise Aden alone, never hiring another nanny. He was almost 6 now, a happy child who barely remembered those dark nights. One afternoon we were playing in the yard when a car pulled up. A young woman stepped out, holding a baby in her arms. My breath caught in my throat. It was her. Sheena. She was back. As I stood frozen in the yard, my heart pounded in my chest. The woman stepping out of the car, holding the baby in her arms, was unmistakably Sheena. Her hair was shorter now, dyed a lighter shade, and she wore a different style of clothing, but there was no mistaking those eyes, cold, distant, and filled with something I couldn't quite name. Aden tugged at my hand. "Mom, what's wrong?" I barely heard him. My gaze remained locked on Sheena as she spoke briefly with the driver and then started walking toward the house across the street. My mind screamed at me to call the police, to do something, but my body wouldn't move. I needed to be sure. After all these years, after the nightmares and unanswered questions, I needed to know what she was doing here with another child. I bent down quickly and whispered to Aden, "Go inside, sweetheart. I'll be right back." He frowned but obeyed, running toward the house. Once he was safely inside, I started moving, keeping my distance but never taking my eyes off Sheena. She knocked on the door, and a woman answered, greeting her warmly. My stomach churned. Had she found another family to deceive? Another child to harm? I crept closer, my breath shallow. From where I stood, I could hear faint snippets of their conversation. So grateful you could take over for me, the woman was saying. She's been fussy lately, but I trust you'll handle her well. Sheena smiled, a soft, sweet expression that I knew was a lie. Of course, you have nothing to worry about. A chill ran down my spine. My pulse quickened as I reached into my pocket for my phone. I should call the police now. I should warn this woman. But before I could make a move, Sheena's eyes flickered in my direction. She had seen me. For a long, unbearable moment, we just stared at each other. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her lips. Not the pleasant, reassuring one she had given the woman, but something else. Something meant only for me. It was the same eerie smile I had seen that night in Aden's room, just before she had struck me and vanished. I gripped my phone tighter, my hands clammy. She turned back to the woman, speaking as if nothing had happened. I took a step back, then another, my heart hammering wildly. My instincts screamed at me to run, to grab Aden and leave. But leave to where? How could I live knowing she was still out there, still preying on innocent families? Then, as if she could read my thoughts, she glanced at me once more, her lips forming silent words before she stepped inside and shut the door. I blinked. Had she really spoken, or was it my mind playing tricks on me? But I knew what she had said. The words echoed in my head, chilling me to my core. See you soon. My breath hitched, and I staggered back toward my house, my hands shaking as I dialed the police. This time, I wouldn't let her disappear. This time, I would make sure they found her. Or so I hoped.